The elevator door slid open, and there he was, the man who destroyed me 6 months ago, now standing in my husband's office, wearing a wrinkled suit 2 sizes too big, clutching a folder of lies. His eyes met mine, and I watched the color drain from his face like water circling a drain. But let me take you back to where this all started, because revenge tastes sweetest when you understand exactly how far someone has fallen. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my apartment keys that Tuesday afternoon. The autumn wind bit at my cheeks, but the real chill came from the fever burning through my body. I'd left work 3 hours early, something I never did because my head felt like someone was using it as a drum, and my stomach wouldn't stop churning. My boss had practically pushed me out the door, insisting I looked terrible. I'd called Unwoo twice to let him know I was coming home sick, but both calls went straight to voicemail. Nothing unusual there. He never answered when I needed him. The apartment building hallway smelled like Mrs. Kim's kimchi from down the hall, a comforting scent that usually made me smile. Today, it made my stomach flip. I just wanted to collapse into bed, maybe have Unwoo make me some soup if he was home. After 3 years together, I still held on to these little hopes that he'd take care of me the way I took care of him. I pushed open our apartment door as quietly as possible, not wanting to wake Unwoo if he was napping. He'd mentioned being tired lately, staying up late working on his job applications, or so he claimed. The living room was empty, his laptop closed on the coffee table next to an empty cup I'd probably have to wash later. Dirty dishes seemed to multiply whenever I left him alone. Then I heard it. Laughter, coming from our bedroom. Male voices, plural, followed by sounds that made my blood freeze in my veins. For a moment I stood paralyzed in the hallway, my fevered brain trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Maybe he was watching a movie. Maybe I was hallucinating from being sick. Maybe anything except what my gut already knew was true. My feet carried me forward, even though everything in me screamed to run. The bedroom door stood half open, and through that gap I saw my entire world collapse. Unwoo was in our bed, the bed I'd saved up 3 months to buy, the bed where he'd promised me forever, with another man. They were tangled together, kissing with the kind of passion Unwoo hadn't shown me in over a year. The stranger had dark hair styled in an expensive cut, wore designer clothes thrown carelessly on my bedroom floor, and looked at my boyfriend like he owned him. The folder of resumes I was holding hit the floor with a slap that echoed like a gunshot. Both of them jerked apart, and Unwoo's eyes met mine. I waited for shock, for guilt, for some sign that he cared that I'd caught him destroying us. Instead, his face twisted into something between annoyance and relief. "Taemin," he said flatly, not even bothering to cover himself or move away from the other man. "You're home early." That's what he said. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "This isn't what it looks like." Just an observation about my schedule, like I'd interrupted his lunch break, instead of catching him cheating in our shared bed. The other man, who I'd later learn was named Hosak, actually laughed. He sat up, completely unashamed, and looked me up and down with eyes full of mockery. "So this is the famous Taemin, the one who pays all your bills? He's even more pathetic than you described." My legs gave out, and I grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. What is happening?" Unwoo sighed dramatically, like I was inconveniencing him by existing. He climbed out of bed with zero shame, pulling on his pants while Hosak watched with an amused smirk. "Honestly, Taemin, I'm almost glad you found out. I've been exhausted keeping up this act." "Act?" My voice came out as a whisper. The fever, the shock, the betrayal, everything was crushing my chest until I could barely breathe. "Did you really think I loved you?" Unwoo's voice was cruel, surgical in its precision to hurt me. "You're boring, Taemin. You wake up at 6 every morning, make the same breakfast, go to your little office job, come home and talk about your day like anyone cares.
You're predictable and dull, and the only interesting thing about you is your paycheck." Hosak stretched lazily on my bed, clearly enjoying the show. "Yunwoo's been with me for 14 months now. You were just convenient. Someone had to pay rent while he figured things out."
14 months. Over a year. While I was working overtime to afford our anniversary dinner, he was with someone else. While I was defending him to my friends who said he was using me, he was laughing about me behind my back. While I was planning our future, he was counting down the days until he could leave. "I gave you everything," I said, tears finally breaking through. "I loved you. I trusted you. I worked extra hours so you could focus on finding the right job. I believed in you when no one else did." Yunwoo rolled his eyes, actually rolled them, like my pain was boring him. "And that's exactly why you're so easy to use, Taemin. You're a doormat. You're so desperate to be loved that you'll let anyone walk all over you. Honestly, I did you a favor staying this long. At least you had someone, even if it was fake." Something inside me shattered, and I felt the pieces cutting me from the inside. My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. "Get out." "What?" Yunwoo looked genuinely surprised. "Get out of my apartment." My voice rose to a shout that hurt my throat. "This place is in my name. I pay for everything. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave, or I'm calling the police and telling them you're trespassing." Hosek laughed harder. "Oh, he's got some fire after all. This is entertaining." But I wasn't playing anymore. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and started dialing. Yunwoo's expression finally shifted to something like concern when he realized I was serious. He'd gotten comfortable thinking I'd always forgive him, always take him back, always be there to use. "Fine, keep your sad little apartment. Hosek's place is 10 times nicer anyway. But don't come crying to me when you realize how alone you are. Nobody else is going to want someone as boring and broken as you." They got dressed while I stood in the doorway, refusing to leave until they did. Yunwoo threw his clothes into garbage bags with angry, jerky movements. Hosek kept making snide comments about our furniture, our decorations, everything I'd carefully chosen to make this place a home. Each word was designed to hurt, and they hit their targets perfectly. 45 minutes later, they were gone. The apartment door slammed behind them, and I stood in the sudden silence surrounded by the wreckage of my life. The bed was unmade, still warm from their bodies. Yunwoo's cologne mixed with an unfamiliar, expensive scent hung in the air. Evidence of my stupidity was everywhere I looked. I don't remember walking to the bathroom. I don't remember turning on the shower. But suddenly, I was sitting in the tub, still fully clothed, hot water pouring over me while I sobbed so hard I thought I might break apart completely. The fever made everything feel surreal, like this was happening to someone else, and I was just watching from far away. My phone buzzed. Text messages from Unwoo, because apparently he wasn't done destroying me yet. "You'll regret this. You need me more than I need you. Good luck finding anyone else. You're too damaged now. I only stayed out of pity anyway." Each message was a calculated strike, aimed at the parts of me that were already bleeding. I blocked his number. Then I blocked Hosak's too when he started sending laughing emojis and messages about how I should thank them for the free entertainment. I blocked them on every platform I could think of, trying to erase them from my digital life since I couldn't erase them from my memory. The water ran cold before I finally got out. I strepped the bed, shoving everything into trash bags because I couldn't stand the thought of sleeping on those sheets ever again. My hands moved mechanically, cleaning and erasing, while my mind replayed every moment of the past 3 years. How many times had he lied? How many late nights with friends were actually with Hosak? How many times had he kissed me while thinking of someone else?
By midnight, the apartment looked different. Empty spaces where Unwoo's things had been. Fresh sheets on the bed that still felt contaminated. I sat on my couch, the one I'd bought myself before we moved in together, and stared at the wall until the sun came up. The fever raged, my body ached, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the gaping wound in my chest where my heart used to be. I called in sick to work for the rest of the week. My boss, Mr. Park, was understanding when I told him I had a family emergency. I couldn't tell him the truth, that my family was myself, alone, trying to pick up the pieces that might be too broken to fix. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a stranger, hollow eyes, pale skin, a lost expression that scared me. Days blurred together. I ate because I had to, not because I wanted to. Sleep came in fits, interrupted by nightmares where Unwoo and Hosak laughed while I begged them to explain what I'd done wrong. My friends called, but I let everything go to voicemail. How could I explain that I'd been so blind, so stupid, so utterly convinced that love meant sacrifice, when really I'd just been convenient? A week after the betrayal, I finally ventured outside. The world looked different, like someone had turned down the color and brightness. Couples walking hand in hand made my stomach turn. Happy laughter felt like mockery. I wandered without direction, eventually finding myself at a small coffee shop I'd never noticed before, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The rain started as I pushed through the door, drops pattering against the window like they were trying to get in. Inside smelled of espresso and cinnamon, warm and safe in a way I desperately needed. I ordered something random, not caring what, and found a corner table where I could hide from the world.
That's when I heard his voice. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" I looked up, ready to say yes, even though the chair was clearly empty, but the words died in my throat. The man standing there had kind eyes, the sort that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He wore an expensive suit that somehow didn't look pretentious, just professional and put together. Everything about him radiated calm confidence, such a stark contrast to Yunwoo's constant neediness that I felt disoriented. No, it's free," I managed, my voice rough from days of crying. He sat down gracefully, setting his own coffee cup on the table. Up close, I could see he was probably a few years older than me, with the kind of presence that made people naturally pay attention. "I'm Hanul," he offered, extending his hand. "You looked like you could use some company, but I can leave if you prefer to be alone." Something about his directness, his genuine offer to leave if I wanted, made me shake my head. "Taemin. And company might be nice, actually." We talked for hours, or rather Hanul talked and slowly drew me out of my shell. He told me about his work. He owned several businesses, though he didn't brag about it, just mentioned it casually when explaining why he was in this neighborhood. He asked me about my job, my interests, things about me as a person rather than what I could provide. When I mentioned I worked in accounting, he actually seemed interested, asking intelligent questions about what I did. The conversation felt like putting balm on a burn. I didn't tell him about Yunwoo, not that first day, but somehow he seemed to understand that I was hurting. He didn't push, didn't pry, just offered easy companionship that asked nothing in return. When the coffee shop started closing, I was surprised to see 3 hours had passed. "Would you like to do this again?" Hanul asked as we stood outside, the rain having stopped while we talked. "Same time next week? I often work from this neighborhood, and the coffee here is excellent." I hesitated, every instinct screaming that I couldn't trust anyone, that I'd be hurt again. But something in Hanul's patient expression made me nod. I'd like that. He smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that made my chest ache with something that wasn't quite pain. "See you next week then, Taemin. Take care of yourself." I watched him walk away, disappearing into the evening crowd, and felt the smallest spark of something I'd thought Yunwoo had killed forever.
Not hope exactly, not yet, but maybe the possibility that hope could exist again someday.
The weeks that followed became a strange rhythm of healing and setbacks. Every Tuesday evening at 6, I met Hanul at the coffee shop that had somehow become sacred ground for my recovery. He never missed a meeting, never showed up late, never made me feel like spending time with me was an obligation. These small reliabilities meant everything to someone who'd learned that promises were just pretty words people used to manipulate you. Our third meeting was when I finally told him about Unwoo. The story poured out of me like poison I'd been holding in, contaminating me from the inside. I told him everything: the cheating, the cruelty, the 14 months of lies, the way Hosek had laughed at my pain. Hanu listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious but never judgmental. When I finished, tears streaming down my face in the middle of this public coffee shop, he handed me his handkerchief without a word. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said quietly. "I know it wasn't easy to share." "I probably think I'm pathetic," I said, wiping my eyes and feeling embarrassed by my outburst. Letting someone use me for 3 years without seeing it? Hanul's response surprised me. "I think you're brave. It takes courage to love someone completely, to trust them with your heart. The fact that one person abused that trust doesn't make you weak, Taman. It makes them cruel. There's a difference." Those words settled into my chest like a warm stone, heavy but comforting. No one had ever framed my heartbreak that way before. My friends had offered sympathy mixed with "I told you so" undertones. My family, the few I'd told, had suggested I should have known better. But Hanul saw my capacity to love as strength rather than weakness, and that perspective shift changed something fundamental in how I saw myself. As autumn faded into early winter, our friendship deepened in ways I hadn't expected. Hanul introduced me to his world: upscale restaurants where he was greeted by name, art galleries where he could explain each piece's history, quiet parks where we could walk and talk for hours. But he never made me feel lesser for my simpler life. When I took him to my favorite cheap noodle shop, he ate with genuine enthusiasm and came back 3 more times because he loved their broth. I learned that Hanul had built his business empire from almost nothing. His parents had passed away when he was 22, leaving him with debts and a failing small company. Instead of giving up, he'd worked himself to exhaustion, made smart decisions, took calculated risks, and turned that struggling business into 5 successful companies, spanning technology, real estate, and consulting. But success hadn't made him arrogant. If anything, he seemed more grounded than anyone I'd ever met. "Money doesn't make you important," he told me one evening as we walked through a Christmas market, lights twinkling around us like captured stars. "Character does. Integrity does. How you treat people when you have nothing to gain from them, that's what defines who you really are." I was starting to understand that Hanu lived by these principles. He tipped generously, remembered the names of servers and shop owners, donated anonymously to charities, and treated his employees with respect that bordered on reverence. Watching him move through the world with such casual kindness made me realize how twisted my understanding of relationships had become during my time with Unwoo. 3 months into our friendship, something shifted. We were at the coffee shop, our usual spot, and Hanul was telling me about a business deal that had fallen through. The setback had cost him money, but he seemed more concerned about the employees who would be affected. Watching his face as he talked, seeing the genuine care he showed for people he barely knew, I felt my heart do something dangerous. It stumbled, stuttered, and started beating in a new rhythm, one that whispered his name. I was falling in love with Hanul. The realization terrified me so completely that I almost ran from the coffee shop right then. How could I trust these feelings after everything with Unwoo? What if I was just replacing one attachment with another?
What if I was seeing Hanul through rose-colored glasses, missing red flags again because I was too desperate to be loved? But as days passed and I examined my feelings with the careful scrutiny of someone who'd been burned before, I realized this was completely different. What I felt for Hanul wasn't the anxious, desperate need I'd mistaken for love with Unwoo. It wasn't the constant worry about whether I was enough, the exhausting effort to earn affection I never received. With Hanul, I felt peaceful, safe, like I could be entirely myself without performing or pretending, and that would be not just acceptable, but valued. Still, I buried these feelings deep. Hanul had never indicated he saw me as anything more than a friend. He was successful, handsome, kind. He could have anyone. Why would he choose someone like me, someone still gluing together pieces of his shattered heart? So I treasured our friendship and tried not to hope for more, because hoping had only ever led to pain. Then came the evening that changed everything. 4 months after we'd met, Hanul asked me to dinner at a restaurant with a 6-month waiting list. I'd dressed carefully, telling myself this was just friends having a nice meal, ignoring how my hands shook while buttoning my shirt. The restaurant was stunning. Dim lighting, soft music, tables spaced for privacy, the kind of place where marriage proposals happened. Hanul met me at the entrance wearing a suit that made my breath catch, his smile warm and somehow nervous in a way I'd never seen before. Dinner was amazing, though I barely tasted the expensive food because I was hyper-aware of every glance, every accidental brush of hands when we both reached for the water pitcher. Hanul seemed distracted, kept starting sentences and stopping, which was unusual for someone so usually articulate. Finally, as dessert arrived, he set down his fork and looked at me with an intensity that made my pulse race. "Taemin, I need to tell you something, and I'm terrified I'll ruin our friendship, but I can't keep pretending anymore."
My heart stopped. This was it. He was going to tell me our friendship was too much, that I was too broken to be around, that he'd met someone and wouldn't have time for our coffee shop meetings anymore. "I'm in love with you," Hanul said, and the world tilted sideways. "I have been for months, maybe from the first day we met, and you looked at me with those sad eyes that held so much strength you didn't even recognize. I know you're still healing. I know Unwoo damaged your ability to trust. I know you might not feel the same way. But I needed you to know that when I look at you, I see someone extraordinary, someone brave and kind and beautiful inside and out. I see someone I want to spend every day with, if you'll have me." Tears were streaming down my face again, but these were different tears. Happy tears. Healing tears. "I love you too," I whispered, barely able to get the words past the emotion clogging my throat. I've been so scared to admit it, even to myself, because last time I loved someone, it destroyed me. But this feels different. You feel different, like coming home after being lost for years. Hanul's face transformed with a smile so bright it could have powered the city. He reached across the table, taking my hands in his larger, warmer ones. "I'm going to spend every single day proving that you can trust me with your heart. I'm going to show you what real love looks like: partnership, respect, cherishing every part of you. And I'm going to be patient with your healing because you're worth every second of waiting." We didn't kiss that night. Not yet, because Hanul understood that I needed to move at my own pace. Instead, we held hands while walking through the city, talking about what a relationship between us might look like. He asked me what I needed to feel safe, what boundaries I wanted to establish, how we could build something healthy together. These conversations felt revolutionary after years with someone who'd never asked what I needed, only demanded what he wanted. Our relationship bloomed slowly, carefully, like a flower pushing through winter frost. Hanul courted me with old-fashioned romance, flowers delivered to my office,
handwritten notes tucked into my coat pockets, surprise picnics in parks where he'd remembered I mentioned wanting to watch the sunrise. He never rushed physical intimacy, letting me set every boundary and respecting each one without complaint. When we finally kissed 6 weeks into dating, it felt like the sky opening up and pouring starlight directly into my chest. Meeting Hanul's friends and business associates showed me what respect looked like. They treated me as an equal, asked about my work and opinions, included me in conversations naturally. Nobody made me feel like an accessory or questioned what Hanul saw in me. His best friend Junho pulled me aside once to say, "I've never seen Hanul this happy. Whatever you're doing, please keep doing it." The idea that I could make someone happy just by being myself was still foreign, but getting easier to believe.
2 months into our relationship, Hanul asked me to move in with him. His house was beautiful, spacious but somehow cozy, filled with books and art and comfortable furniture that invited you to stay. But more than the physical space, living with Hanul meant experiencing daily proof that healthy relationships existed. We split chores based on preference rather than obligation. We had disagreements, but resolved them through calm conversation. We supported each other's goals and celebrated small victories. Every day reinforced that what I'd had with Unwoo wasn't love. It was a cautionary tale about what happens when you accept crumbs and call it a feast. 6 months after we started dating, Hanul proposed, not with a grand public gesture, but at our coffee shop, the place where everything began. He'd reserved the entire shop for the evening, filling it with flowers and candles, but keeping the same corner table where we'd first met. The ring was perfect, simple, elegant, chosen with careful attention to my tastes rather than what would be most impressive. "Taemin, you are my home," he said, kneeling in front of my chair while I ugly cried into my hands. "You are my peace, my joy, my favorite part of every day. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life and fall asleep grateful that you chose me. Will you marry me?" Through tears and laughter, I said yes. Yes to forever with someone who saw all my broken pieces and called them beautiful. Yes to building a life based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Yes to believing that I deserved this, deserved him, deserved happiness. Our wedding was small and perfect, held in the same garden where we'd had our first official date. I wore a white suit that made me feel elegant, and Hanul cried when he saw me walking down the aisle, which made me cry, which made half our guests cry. Our vows were promises to choose each other every day, to communicate honestly, to grow together rather than apart. When we kissed as husbands, I felt every scar from Unwoo's betrayal transform into something different. Not wounds anymore, but proof that I'd survived and found something infinitely better. Married life exceeded every expectation. Hanul's success meant financial security, but more importantly, it meant time. Time to travel, to pursue hobbies, to simply enjoy each other's company without the stress that had defined my previous relationship. He encouraged me to pursue my dream of getting my CPA certification, even hiring a tutor and rearranging his schedule to support my studying. When I passed the exam, he threw a celebration that made me feel like I'd won an Olympic medal. But the real gift was simpler, being loved completely. Hanul loved me when I was happy and when I was sad, when I looked my best and when I was sick with swollen eyes and a red nose. He loved my quirks, my passions, my fears, and my dreams. He created space for me to be entirely human, entirely myself, without ever making me feel like that self wasn't enough. I'd almost forgotten Unwoo existed. Almost. Then one morning, 6 months into our marriage, Hanul came to breakfast reviewing applications for a new position at his main company. His assistant had forwarded the top candidates for him to personally interview. "Interesting range of applicants," Hanul commented, scrolling through his tablet. "Most are overqualified, honestly. Though this one, the credentials look good, but something feels off. Enwoo Park? Do you know anyone by that name?"
My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. The name I'd tried to erase from my memory suddenly filled my mouth with the taste of ash. "What did you say?" Hanyul looked up, immediately noticing my expression. "Enwoo Park. Apparently he has 3 years of experience in marketing and a degree from Seoul National University. But when my assistant called his references, there were some discrepancies. Why? Do you know him?" I set down my cup carefully, hands trembling slightly. "He's my ex-boyfriend, the one who cheated on me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Hanyul's expression shifted to something I'd rarely seen: cold, calculating fury, carefully controlled. "I see, and these credentials are likely fabricated." "Enwoo never finished university," I said slowly, memories flooding back. "He dropped out after a year, and he's never held a steady job, which is why I supported him for 3 years. If he's claiming otherwise, he's lying." Hanyul was quiet for a long moment, his business mind clearly working through scenarios. Finally, he looked at me with gentle eyes that contrasted with his earlier anger. "What would you like me to do? I can reject this application right now, and you'll never have to think about him again." I considered this. Part of me wanted exactly that, to erase Enwoo from my life completely, to never face the person who'd shattered me. But another part, the part that had healed and grown stronger, felt something different. Curiosity, maybe, or the desire for closure I'd never gotten. "Interview him," I heard myself say. "I want to be there when you do." Hanyul studied my face carefully. "Are you sure? I don't want this to hurt you." I reached across the table and took his hand, feeling the warm security of his wedding ring against my palm. "I'm sure. I think I need to see him again, to prove to myself that I'm really okay now. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Hanyul said, squeezing my hand. "Then we'll do this together, and if at any point you want to leave, we leave. You're in control here, Taemin. Always." That's how I found myself a week later, sitting in Hanyul's massive corner office on the 43rd floor of his building, waiting for my past to walk through the door and confront my present.
The office was deliberately designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that cost more than some cars, awards and certificates lining one wall, proving Hanyul's success. I sat in a leather chair to the side of his desk, positioned so I'd be visible the moment someone entered, but not the first thing they'd see. Hanyul sat behind his desk, looking every inch the powerful CEO, his expression professionally neutral, though I could see the protective tension in his shoulders. My heart hammered against my ribs as we waited. Part of me still couldn't believe this was happening. What were the odds that Eunwoo would apply to my husband's company? Then again, Hanyul's businesses were well known for good pay and benefits. Of course, someone desperate and unqualified would try to lie their way in. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Kim, your 3 o'clock appointment is here." "Send him in," Hanyul said calmly, though his hand found mine briefly under the desk, a quick squeeze of support. The door opened, and there he was. Eunwoo looked terrible in a way that might have made me feel guilty 6 months ago, but now just felt like observing facts. His suit was cheap and fit poorly, hanging off a frame that had lost weight in all the wrong ways. His hair, once styled meticulously, looked like he'd cut it himself. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he wasn't sleeping well. He carried a folder that I'd bet money contained fabricated credentials, his hands gripping it like a lifeline. Eunwoo's eyes went to Hanyul first, taking in the powerful man behind the imposing desk. I saw him straighten slightly, putting on a confident mask that didn't quite hide the desperation underneath. Then his gaze swept the room and landed on me. I watched the recognition hit him like a physical blow. His face went from pale to gray, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. The folder slipped from his fingers, scattering papers across the expensive carpet.
For a long moment, nobody moved. "Please, have a seat, Mr. Park," Hanul said, his voice professionally courteous, but with an edge that could cut glass. "You seem surprised." Unwoo stumbled to the chair across from Hanul's desk, his eyes darting between us like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Tamin, what are you... I don't understand."
Let me clarify the situation, Hanul said, leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone completely in control. I'm Kim Hanul, CEO of Kim Industries and 4 subsidiary companies. This is my husband, Taemin Kim. You applied for a marketing position in my company, correct? The word husband hit Unwoo like a slap. His eyes dropped to my left hand, seeing the wedding ring that matched Hanul's, and something in his expression crumbled. Husband? He repeated numbly. You got married? 6 months ago, I said, finding my voice steady despite the surreal situation. The most beautiful day of my life. Unwoo looked at me properly then, really seeing me for the first time. I knew what he saw. The expensive but tasteful clothes, the healthy glow of someone well-rested and well-fed, the confident posture of a person who knew their worth. I looked nothing like the broken man he'd left sobbing in a stripped apartment. That realization played across his face like watching someone realize they'd thrown away a winning lottery ticket. You look different, Unwoo managed. I'm happy now, I said simply. That's what being actually loved does to a person. Hanul picked up the folder from where Unwoo had dropped it, flipping through the papers with practiced efficiency. Before we continue, Mr. Park, I need to address some concerns about your application. You claim to have a degree from Seoul National University, graduating in 2021. However, our background check found no record of your graduation. You also list 3 years of marketing experience at a company that closed 5 years ago, making it impossible for you to have worked there recently. Would you care to explain these discrepancies? I watched Unwoo's face cycle through emotions, panic, anger, resignation. He'd been caught, and he knew it. His shoulders slumped, the fake confidence evaporating completely. I needed a job, he said, his voice small. I've been applying everywhere for months. Nobody calls back when you're honest about having no degree and no real experience. I thought maybe if I just got an interview, I could prove I could do the work. By lying? Hanul's voice was cold now, all pretense of courtesy gone. You understand that falsifying credentials is not just grounds for rejection, but could potentially be fraud. I could report this to authorities. Unwoo's face went even paler. Please, I'm sorry. I'm desperate. I lost everything. My apartment, my savings. I'm living with a friend who's threatening to kick me out. I just need a chance.
You lost everything? I spoke up, leaning forward slightly. Tell me, Unwoo, how exactly did that happen? Last I saw you, you were living in my apartment that I paid for, enjoying a relationship with Hosek that you'd maintained for over a year while using me for financial support. What changed? The question hung in the air like a blade. Unwoo couldn't meet my eyes, staring at his hands instead. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Hosek left me 2 months after you kicked me out. He found someone richer, someone who could actually afford his lifestyle. He took most of my savings when he left. I'd given him access to my accounts like an idiot. Ironic, I said without sympathy. You used me for money and got used for money in return. Poetic, really. I never understood how expensive everything was, Unwoo said, words spilling out like he couldn't stop them. Rent, utilities, food, everything. You made it look so easy, but I couldn't keep up. I got evicted after 3 months, started staying with friends, but nobody wants a permanent house guest. I've been applying to jobs for months, but I have no skills, no experience, nothing to offer. You were right about me, Taman. I am useless." There was a time when hearing him admit this would have given me satisfaction, maybe even vindication. Now I just felt nothing. This broken man in front of me was a stranger, someone I'd once loved but no longer recognized or cared about. That realization was more freeing than any apology could have been. "Mr. Park," Hunnell said, his voice firm, "I want to make something very clear. You didn't just lose a job opportunity today. You lost it the moment you lied on your application. But more than that, you lost something far more valuable 6 months ago when you betrayed the person sitting next to me. Taman is the most incredible person I've ever met. Intelligent, hardworking, loyal, kind even when kindness wasn't deserved. He gave you everything, and you threw it away to chase something flashy and hollow. That's not just a mistake, Mr. Park. That's a fundamental failure of character." Unwoo's face crumpled, and suddenly he was sliding out of his chair, dropping to his knees on the office floor. I jerked back in shock as he pressed his forehead to the ground, hands stretched toward Hunnell's desk in a gesture of complete supplication. "Please," Unwoo's voice broke on the word, desperate and raw. "Please, I'm begging you. I need this job. I'll do anything. Cleaning, filing, I don't care how low the position is or how little it pays. I made terrible mistakes. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please give me a chance. I'm drowning here." The sight was pathetic, but not in a way that inspired sympathy. This was the man who'd laughed while Hosek insulted me, who'd called me boring and pathetic and worthless, who'd spent 14 months lying to my face while using my money to date someone else. Seeing him literally on his knees didn't make me feel powerful or victorious. It just made me sad. Sad that I'd wasted 3 years on someone so fundamentally lacking in integrity. Sad that he'd never learned anything except how to use people until he ran out of victims.
Hanuel's expression remained unmoved. He pressed the button on his desk phone. "Security, please come to my office." "No, please!" Unwoo's begging became more frantic. "Taman, please talk to him. You know me. We were together for 3 years. That has to count for something. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I was stupid and cruel and I threw away something precious. Please, just one chance." I stood up, and Unwoo's tear-stained face turned to me with desperate hope that made my chest tight. I walked closer until I was looking down at the man who'd once made me feel so small. "You're right," I said quietly. "We were together for 3 years, and in those 3 years you taught me valuable lessons. You taught me that love without respect is meaningless. You taught me that I deserve better than someone who sees me as convenient rather than cherished. You taught me what betrayal looks like so I could recognize genuine loyalty when I finally found it. For those lessons, painful as they were, I'm actually grateful." "Then help me," Unwoo whispered. "Please." I shook my head slowly. "I'm going to do something you never did for me, Unwoo. I'm going to be honest with you. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Holding on to anger would only hurt me, and I'm done letting you hurt me. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean trusting you again, and it definitely doesn't mean giving you opportunities you haven't earned." "You became successful," Unwoo said, looking between me and Hanuel. "You found someone rich and powerful. You won. Why can't you afford to be generous now?" The implication in his words, that I'd somehow done the same thing he'd tried to do, just successfully, made anger flash through me for the first time since he'd entered. "You think I married Hanuel for money? You think this is about winning? That shows how little you understand about anything real. I didn't find someone rich, Unwoo. I found someone who values me, who respects me, who wants to build a life with me as an equal partner. The money is irrelevant. If Hanuel worked at a convenience store and treated me with half the respect he shows me daily, I'd still choose him over anyone else in the world.
That's the difference between you and me. I understand that people aren't resources to be used. They're human beings deserving of dignity and honesty. Security entered the office, two professional men in suits who assessed the situation quickly. Hanul gestured to Unwoo, still kneeling on the floor. Please escort Mr. Park from the building. He's not to be allowed back on the premises. Wait! Unwoo struggled as the security guards helped him to his feet. Taemin, please! I really did love you. I know I said terrible things, but I was scared. I do care about you. You have to believe me.
I looked at him one final time, seeing not the man who'd destroyed me, but just another person who'd made bad choices and was facing the consequences. No, Unwoo, you didn't love me. You don't even know what love means. But I hope someday you figure it out, for your sake. Not so you can get me back or use someone else, but so you can become a person who's capable of genuine connection. Because right now, you're just empty. The security guards led him out, his protests echoing down the hallway until a door closed and cut them off. The office fell silent except for the quiet hum of the city beyond the windows. I stood there, processing what had just happened, feeling lighter than I had in years. Hanel came to stand beside me, his hand finding mine and squeezing gently. Are you okay? I turned to look at my husband, this man who'd shown me what real love looked like, who'd waited patiently while I healed, who'd given me a life beyond my wildest dreams, not through money, but through partnership and respect. I'm perfect, I said honestly. That chapter of my life is completely closed now. I'm not angry, I'm not hurt, I'm just done, ready to focus on our future instead of my past. He was right about one thing, Hanel said, pulling me into a gentle embrace. You did win. Not because you married someone successful, but because you survived something that could have broken you permanently and chose to heal instead. You won the moment you decided you deserved better than what he was offering. Everything else is just proof that you were right. We stood there for a moment, holding each other while the city sparkled below us. Then Hanel's phone buzzed with his next appointment, and we separated back into our professional roles. I kissed him quickly and headed out, needing to get back to my own office where I had a presentation to prepare. In the elevator going down, I caught my reflection in the polished metal doors. The man looking back at me was confident, well-dressed, genuinely happy. I barely recognized him as the broken person who'd stood in a different elevator 6 months ago, heading to a coffee shop to hide from the world. The transformation wasn't about external changes, the nice clothes, the wedding ring, the comfortable life. It was internal. I'd learned my worth, learned that being alone was better than being with someone who diminished me, learned that real love existed and I deserved it. My phone buzzed with a text from Hanel. Dinner tonight? I'm thinking that Italian place you love. We can celebrate closing bad chapters and writing better ones. I smiled and texted back a quick yes, feeling grateful beyond words. Not just for Hanel, though he was incredible, but for the entire journey. The betrayal had hurt, yes, but it had also freed me from a relationship that would have slowly killed my spirit. Unwoo's cruelty had actually been a gift wrapped in terrible paper. It forced me to confront my worth and decide I deserved better. That evening, over pasta and wine, Hanel and I talked about everything except Unwoo. We discussed an upcoming vacation, my ideas for advancing at work, his plans for expanding one of his businesses, whether we were ready to talk about starting a family. Our future stretched out bright and full of possibility, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine love.
Later, lying in bed with Hanel's arm around me and the city lights filtering through our curtains, I thought about revenge. People always talked about it like it required elaborate schemes, dramatic confrontations, crushing your enemies beneath your heel. But I'd learned something better.
The sweetest revenge wasn't making Unwoo suffer. It was being genuinely happy without him. It was building a life so fulfilling that his betrayal became just a footnote, a brief, dark chapter before the real story began. Unwoo would have to live knowing he'd thrown away someone who truly loved him, someone who would have stood by him if he'd been honest and respectful. He'd have to live with the knowledge that I'd found someone better, not in terms of wealth or status, but in terms of fundamental human decency. That realization would haunt him far more than any punishment I could have deliberately inflicted. As for me, I got to wake up every morning next to my best friend, my partner, my love. I got to build a life based on honesty and mutual support. I got to be cherished exactly as I was, quirks and all. That wasn't just revenge, it was victory in its purest form. I'd caught my ex cheating, and 6 months later, he was literally on his knees begging for scraps from the life I'd built without him. But the real triumph wasn't his downfall, it was my rise. It was learning that I deserved love, respect, and partnership. It was finding someone who saw my value and chose me every single day. Unwoo had tried to convince me I was boring, worthless, lucky that anyone would tolerate me. He'd been wrong about everything. I was interesting to the right person, I was valuable, and I didn't need luck. I needed self-respect and the courage to wait for something real. As I drifted off to sleep, Hannel's heartbeat steady beneath my ear, I felt nothing but gratitude for the pain that taught me strength, for the betrayal that showed me what I wouldn't accept, for the healing that proved I was stronger than my worst experiences, and most of all, for the love that showed me what I'd been missing and deserved all along. The story of Taemin and Unwoo was over. The story of Taemin and Hannel was just beginning, and it was going to be beautiful. Thank you so much for watching this story about betrayal, healing, and finding true love. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me create more stories like this one. Drop a comment below telling me, have you ever had to face someone from your past after becoming your best self? How did it feel? I love reading your experiences and featuring the best comments in future videos. Also, if you enjoyed this story, check out the playlist in the description for more romance stories about second chances, redemption, and finding happiness after heartbreak. New stories are uploaded every week, so turn on notifications so you never miss one. Remember, your worth isn't determined by how someone treated you. It's determined by how you choose to treat yourself after. You deserve respect, honesty, and real love. Never settle for less. See you in the next story.